May the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts be pleasing in your sight, O God, our rock and our redeemer. Amen. It's so good to see you all in the flesh and to be together. Thanks for braving the cold. I will get to salt and light in a minute, but I want to start with that powerful reading from Isaiah, where the prophet says that the fast God chooses is for us to loose the bonds of injustice, to let the oppressed go free, to share our bread with the hungry, bring the homeless poor into our house, cover the naked, and not to hide ourselves from our own kin. That last part is the line that our Bishop Susan Haynes focused on in her address at Diocesan Convention yesterday when we heard these same readings. Are we hiding from our kin, she asked, and if so, how? How are we failing to show ourselves transparently to those with whom God has put us in relationship? Are we, in fact, turning our backs on those with whom God has connected us? And exactly to whom are we connected? Such good questions. And I can't help but think of our sign out front that you pass on your way in here when we hear the commandment to love our neighbors, those who look and think and love and speak and pray and vote differently from us, to love our neighbors across all of those lines. Well, Bishop Susan used those questions to encourage us toward partnership among congregations. And then later, during some table conversations, our delegation from St. Martin's reflected on some of those partnerships that we already have. First Baptist, of course, whose monthly shared breakfast with our men's fellowship had just happened yesterday morning. Our partnerships with Hickory Neck and Bruton Parish, our fellow Episcopal congregations, to do Vacation Bible School and other events. We partner with Williamsburg United Methodist Church for family meals, which are going to be starting up again, and we partner with the UUs, the Unitarian Universalists, on summer meals for children in the summer. We'll once again this Holy Week be partnering with St. Stephen Lutheran during that holy season. And of course, we open our sanctuary to Temple Bethel for their High Holy Days, and that's a partnership as well. They and many other congregations helped us during our winter shelter week. And then there's St. Cyprian's Episcopal Church in Hampton, a historically black congregation, and their table happened to be right next to us. So I was happy to greet Marshall Jackson, who was a first-time delegate, who's the husband of our former deacon, Darlene Jackson. Deacon Darlene was there as well. I greeted their rector, Hector Sintim, who's relatively new, and then at an adjoining table from Grace Church in Norfolk, their previous long-term rector and the former dean of our convocation, Ron Ramsey. And in my mind was a project that we did with St. Cyprian's 20-some years ago that was called Rowing Together to Overcome Racism. I have a prop. This is an oar, rowing together, get it, that was presented to Pickett Miles to commemorate this project that we did with St. Cyprian's. That's coming up on 22 years ago now that this was presented, and it's signed by a lot of the people who participated. It was the brainchild of Pickett Miles, who was our long-term rector. I knocked this over at the 8. Let's see if I can not do that this time. And their rector at the time, Joy Walton. And it was pulpit exchanges and shared gatherings and learning and dinner groups and just the building of friendships and relationships between St. Martin's and this congregation. And of course, as many of you know, St. Martin's itself had been founded to be an integrated congregation in 1963, which was not something that happened every day in those days. And I've been featuring in the Cloak this Black History Month some of the people who were among the founders and early members of St. Martin's, including our dear Myrtle Engs. Barb Watson's mom was in there this week. So all of those people were in my mind, and I was feeling a particular call to reach out and connect with my African American kin at this time when the persistence of racism and dehumanization is once again on display in our country. I wanted to demonstrate my gratitude for these historically Black congregations and their members for the gifts that they bring to our diocese. And I found myself wishing that when the bishop was encouraging us not to hide from our own kin, that she had been more explicit about that, about the diversity among us in the diocese and about those gifts. And I was talking to Warren about it afterwards, and I was like, I'm having deja vu. I feel like I felt like this before, and I think I even wrote an email to the bishop about it. Well, it turns out that was 7 years ago today, February 8th, 2019. So it was a different bishop. It was Bishop J. Magnus, who famously caught on fire when he was visiting St. Martin's, but that's another story for another time. At that point, I was thanking him. We had had a kind of contentious debate about mission share on the floor of what was then called council. And I was thanking Bishop Magnus for, in his address, linking stewardship, how we support our ministry, mission and ministry, and the Repairing the Breach Commission, which is our diocesan anti-racism commission, which I have the honor to be co-chair of now. And I wrote him this. Both of these efforts, stewardship and repairing the breach, are about what we do with what God has entrusted to us. And in both efforts, we're falling far short of the glory of God. And I told him I was planning, I had waited in line to speak during this debate, and then they ended debate before I got up to the microphone. So I said I was planning to quote the first line of the Repairing the Breach webpage. The sin of slavery thrived in Virginia, and the sin of racism continues to infect and hamper the people and parishes of the Diocese of Southern Virginia. I told him at that time, after a week of turmoil in our Commonwealth that has made the continuing truth of that statement abundantly clear, I'd hate for us to leave council without naming the need for continuing corporate repentance and lifting up the cherished gifts of our African American members and congregations. It took me a little while to remember what that week of turmoil was. Anybody remember 2019, February? The yearbook, Ralph Northam's yearbook picture, right? With somebody in blackface, somebody dressed up like a KKK person. And that was just a year into his term as governor. And since I had, on Friday, been to William & Mary's Charter Day and heard Abigail Spanberger, our newly elected governor, speak after receiving an honorary degree, along with Ken Burns. I'll get back to that in a minute. I went down this little rabbit hole last night as I was researching this week that had brought up these such similar feelings to what I was feeling yesterday about wanting to honor our African American neighbors. And I found out that Abigail, who had just at that point started her term in Congress, was among those who called for Governor Northam's resignation. She said in a public statement, "There should always be serious consequences for actions that demean, intimidate, or threaten our African American communities. Bigotry has no place in Virginia." I agreed with that last sentence. I wrote to the governor, I'm sure with lots of other people. I do not take credit for the fact that he, in fact, did not resign, but tried to make that a springboard for more racially just policies. And we could discuss whether or not that really happened. But what I find so compelling about this resonance, this kind of history rhyming, is that, of course, among the former governors gathered at Abigail Spanberger's inauguration was Ralph Northam. And she thanked all of the former governors for their outreach and their offers of support and help and their continued commitment to Virginia. And that was across party lines, and anything like that gives me hope. Forgiveness gives me hope. Healing gives me hope. And it reminded me of the communion of saints, right, which in our catechism is described as the whole family of God, the living and the dead, those whom we love and those whom we hurt. And just as an aside, I got a big kick about the fact that the person who presided over Abigail's swearing in is a justice from the Supreme Court of Virginia and former Republican lawmaker, who is Diane Langhorst's brother, William Mims. So who is our kin? We've got just a couple degrees of separation there. And within our congregation, of course, we have diversity of all kinds. And we are kin. We are kin. The other thing that was in my mind that fed into all of this was Tuesday night at the All Together meeting in Miles Hall, they showed a film called Healing from Hate, which is about these men who have come out of these white supremacist, nationalist, neo-Nazi groups, really, and healed from that and want to help other people. And so it's a powerful documentary. There's a second part that's going to be shown in a couple weeks. I was particularly struck by the scenes from Charlottesville because I hadn't really, that was just before I moved back to Virginia, and I certainly had seen a lot of the footage, but not a lot of the background. And there was, in this documentary, an African-American man, Julius Long, who had intervened when one of these neo-Nazi type members, Randy Furness, was being attacked by counter-protesters in Charlottesville. And he stood up for him, and they started talking, and they had become friends, and that was part of the healing from hate that this man, that helped facilitate that. And in the film, they say, it's not that we agree with anything that comes out of those movements. It's just that we don't ever forget that there are people inside of those people. There's a human being inside of this person. And we choose not to forget that. So, again, that just gives me hope that there can be healing and transformation, and that we can not hide ourselves from our own kin. And that goes across lines of race and religion and political persuasion. So back to salt and light. I preached about this text 6 years ago. When I first looked it up, I was like, that's pretty good. Maybe I'll just say that one again. But I wanted to tell you all of that I just said. So I just want to hit a couple highlights about salt and light, because 6 years ago I had read a reflection on it from Jim Wallace, and it kind of illuminated for me that they're not just two different metaphors that Jesus decided to use for the same thing. They're sort of complementary. You are the salt of the earth, and you are the light of the world. And Jim Wallace, who's often trying to bridge the gap between political and religious positions, and in fact often says, don't go right, don't go left, go deeper. So you heard that same kind of sensibility in my sermon last week. But he said salt is about flavor, yes, because that's what Jesus says, if salt has lost its flavor. But in the ancient world, it was also a preservative. So that we could imagine that by saying you are the salt of the earth, Jesus is encouraging his followers to preserve the things that need preserving, the important things that sustain and undergird human societies. Some things that conservative-minded folks often admire: honesty, integrity, compassion, fairness, fidelity, dedication to raising our children in ways that are good and right. And light, you are the light of the world, is shining into the darkness, revealing what's wrong, untrue, what's a danger to human life and dignity, the things that need to be changed, which is what progressive or more liberal-minded folks are often drawn to. Exposing injustice, freeing the oppressed, loosing those bonds. The light serves as a beacon that others can see and be drawn to, modeling the love of God and neighbor. And so they're complementary, right? We need both. Preserve what we must preserve, illuminate what needs to be changed. And it makes sense because the reason that we're kin is that we were all created in God's image, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, who loves tradition and values, right? But is also the God of the future, doing a new thing, pulling us forward. So at the 8 o'clock service, I ended with a blessing and a song, and I'm going to invite you to join me in that, even though the person I was singing to is not here. Pickett Miles, as you know, it was, as many of you know, was our rector for 29 years, as I mentioned, part of that incredible, powerful relationship with St. Cyprian's, and has been a regular at the 8 o'clock service for many years. He's moving to North Carolina. He's going to move in with his daughter, Kelly, and so we said goodbye, but not forever, right? Kelly says he's going to have doctor's appointments, he's going to be back, he'll be here on a Sunday, so. But I wanted to, in that moment, acknowledge, as we did a year ago almost now, when we celebrated the 50th anniversary of his first service as rector, the incredible blessing that he has been to St. Martin's. And it made me think again about Charter Day, because in his speech, Ken Burns told the story of the first documentary he made, which was about the Brooklyn Bridge, and how he had interviewed Arthur Miller about it because he had seen a beautiful picture of the Brooklyn Bridge on copies of Arthur Miller's plays, but somehow as he was driving there realized there's nothing in the play about the Brooklyn Bridge. And when Arthur Miller opened the door, he said, "I don't know a damn thing about the Brooklyn Bridge." So it was a very funny and engaging story about that interview. And he was so nervous. He said he remembered to this day, Ken Burns did, how nervous he was to ask these questions. But he got from Arthur Miller a quote, which became the end of his film, the Brooklyn Bridge documentary, and also a kind of motto for him, because he was talking about how the bridge could have been any kind of bridge, but it's this beautiful bridge, right? And so Arthur Miller said, "Maybe you too could add something that would last and be beautiful." And so I said to Pickett, "You did that." Not only, of course, his daughters, who are lasting and beautiful, and so he's going to be with Kelly, but also here. That the work he did here, the ministry he and Helen shared, is something that we are all living in and can abide in, and it's beautiful, and it will last. And I'm so grateful for that witness and for his ministry with us. So I sang a song to him, and I'm going to invite you all to sing it too. And since we'll have a recording of this, he'll be able to see that, even though he's not here. And this is a song we sang when Kathy Boyd retired, and it's just been circulating in my brain. So I will sing, and then I'll invite you to join in, and you'll hear the words are simple, and I'll kind of call them out to you gently. Here we go. May the long time sun shine upon you, all love surround you, and the pure, pure light that's within you guide your way home. May the long time sun shine upon you, shine upon you. All love surround you, all love surround you. And the pure, pure light, and the pure, pure light that's within you, guide your way home. Guide your way home. One more time. This is for you, Pickett. May the long time sun shine upon you. All love surround you in the pure, pure light. And the pure, pure light that's within you guide your way Amen. Thank you.